Hi, John Burroughs again. I'm going to continue with my autobiography, 7 Years to Life. This is chapter 56, and it's called Nothing But a Heartache. Eddie was dead. Eddie was dead. That reality has plagued me my whole life. I miss his dry sense of humor and the way he so expertly cloaked that kind and gentle heart of his. Once again, it was back to the Three Musketeers, booze, pot, and coke. I made the bit of England my home away from home. I was there a minimum of 4 nights a week. On Friday and Saturday nights, it was usually with friends, but often I would go alone and drink. It had the reputation of being a prime place to meet and pick up girls. Meeting someone new and falling in love was not going to happen at that bar. Almost everyone from the customers to the employees disguised who they really were by creating images that they thought would impress the opposite sex rather than just being themselves. There was a cocktail waitress there that worked there 5 nights a week, and she was herself naturally. No false images. It was amazing for a person whose income relied primarily on tips. Her name was Marlene, and she was from New Jersey. There were always many more guys than there were girls. The guys were typically insecure, and the more they drank, the more obnoxious they became. This never failed to reduce the female population of the bar by 80%. Eventually, these obnoxious assholes began to hit on the cocktail waitresses. I will never forget the night that I really noticed Marlene. One of these extremely handsome guys that I call John Q. Good-looking, who could always get laid because of his physical attractiveness, hit on Marlene. He said to her, "I want a 7 and 7, how John Travolta-like, and that is a $20 bill, so make sure you bring me my change, and when you do, you can sit on my lap, sweetheart, and we can count it together." He slapped Marlene on the ass, and she walked away to get his order. After taking a few steps, Marlene hesitated, and you could tell she took a deep breath to relax and control her temper. When she came back, she placed his drink in front of him, but kept the change in her hand. John Q. Good-looking pushed back his chair and motioned to Marlene to sit on his lap while saying, "Okay, baby, it's time to count the change together." Then it happened like a scene in an action movie, and it was over in a matter of minutes. Marlene shoved him out of his chair and with her left foot, and then grabbed him by the wrist. That was undoubtedly some sort of martial arts hold. The hold had to be incredibly painful because he was begging her to release him. She kept him in that hold and kicked out a chair with her foot. She forced him to sit in the chair, never releasing her grip. She then sat on his lap and said to him, "Now it's time to count your change together. Unfortunately, you're going to have to count it one-handed, and you will probably make a mistake." While he counted the change, his face crimson with embarrassment, Marlene spoke right into his ear. "I've seen a lot of good-looking, dumb shits like you who thinks that looks is all they need to get them by. It takes so much more than that, and the only reason I'm helping you count your change is that it is probably too complicated for you. You're the type of idiot that 20 years from now will be sweeping out this place or panhandling, and the good looks will be gone, and no one will notice you." Still maintaining her wrist hold on him, she forcibly walked him to the front door and booted him out. I had to get to know this girl. If any guy in their right mind wanted an older sister, she was the one. I watched her more closely each time I was there, and she could exchange barbs with the best of them, guys included. This usually happened with her regulars, that she obviously enjoyed waiting on them and enjoyed exchanging good-hearted insults with them, and at other times I listened to her give sound advice to those that she respected and had asked for it. I became one of her regulars, and often when her shift was over, I would wait around and talk with her about everything you could imagine. I guess we became confidants for each other. We thoroughly enjoyed each other's company, and yet romance was no part of the equation. She gave me some of the best advice that anyone in my entire life had given me. I hold it close to my heart, and when I heard it, I knew at that instant a change had come. Marlene was a tall New Jersey girl that had been living in California for about 2 years. She was 36 years old. At the time, I was 28 years old. Excuse me. One Friday around 4:30 p.m., she drove into the service station and drove right up to the lube bays where she could see me clearly. This was surprising because she had never come by the station before. She rolled down the window of her 1971 Pontiac Bonneville, remember those? And yelled to me, "Come on, asshole, get in. I have yet to go to Disneyland and you're coming with me. We will be back on Monday and I will take care of all the expenses but the gas and the food. You will be back to work on Tuesday." I walked over to Russ, and he, like everyone else in the station, had heard exactly what she said to me. Russ did not like the idea of such a short notice, and especially the fact that Saturday was without doubt our busiest day. Apparently my conversation with Russ was taking too long for her liking. She got out of her car, and though overall she was just average looking, she had one of those long, slender bodies that often would be compared to a beautiful racehorse. She was lean and firm. She strode confidently up to Russ, and her gaze never left his. "Paul has told me a lot about you, and in many ways he views you as a surrogate father. You know exactly what he's been through, and you need to let me help him because I can." Then Marlene reverted to her Jersey personality and said, as she used her arms to illustrate her long, slender body, "Besides, you old fart, if you can tell me you would turn down this exact invitation if you were single, then he stays." You can tell when Russ likes someone or thinks something is funny because he is the worst I have ever seen at hiding a smile. He chuckled and said, "You really are something." Marlene nodded affirmatively. "He can go, and goddammit, I wish I had the guts to go with you." Marlene replied, "I don't recall inviting you." Russ laughed again and told me to get out of here and told Marlene that I had better be back to work on Tuesday, healthier than when I left. I hopped into the Bonneville and she drove me to my apartment to get some clothes. I told her I wanted to shower, and she said that you could take a shower when we get to the hotel. We have to get moving. Marlene changed my thinking in a profound way on that trip. It was Saturday night, and we just got back from a day at Disneyland and a restaurant. Of all the things she said to me, her advice on this particular night made me see my sufferings in a whole different light. I will do my best to recreate what she said to me that night. "Paul, I want you to sit there and do nothing but listen until I'm done, because it's going to take everything I have to tell you what you so need to hear. You are drinking, drugging, and working yourself toward an early grave, and from what you told me about you and Georgia is that you loved her much more than she loved you. You consider this a tragedy that you cannot overcome when it is simply a mistake. Love is different things to different people, but the cold hard fact is people in love leave each other all the time. The reason for that is new love, if you think about it. It's so easy to find, in addition to the fact that it's possible to love more than one person in any given time. Love is like any other mind-altering drug that clouds your logic and rarely lasts a lifetime. So most of us get in and out of love and wonder what went wrong. Losing a love is simply like having just a heartache. It is similar to a heartache. Some headaches are more severe and last longer than others, but with the proper medication and treatment we get over them. This is the same for heartaches, except with proper medication and treatment, we not only get over them, we become better people. In addition, there are so many different kinds of love. There is love of an animal, a game, yourself, and just about anything that makes you feel good. The fact is, love can become an addiction. When you are not receiving love, it creates an insatiable desire for it. Like any other addiction, you become acclimated to it, and the need to have more causes the high rates of breakup and divorces that we see today. People need to search for something that connects them stronger to each other than loving them does. When I was still in New Jersey and feeling the pressure of time passing, I wanted to get married. I did not want to be alone. I became a cocktail waitress for about 6 months in New Jersey. Most guys in New Jersey, regardless of age, have no respect for women, love, or marriage. It was always a contest as to who had the most sexual conquests. The only thing I found valuable about that experience was that it made me thick-skinned, and it created in me a desire to be able to handle physically those situations that required it. I enrolled in karate classes, and it has served me well on more than one occasion. I moved to New York, Manhattan specifically, because many of my female friends that New York guys were more sophisticated and engaging. It turned out to be the best move I ever made. There were always a lot of guys to choose from when you're a cocktail waitress, and I experimented with some of them, but there was always something missing. If you are a friendly person and have a special talent for reading people, there is a lot of money to be made serving cocktails. I was good enough at it that I could afford a decent apartment in Manhattan. One night when I had just arrived home from work, I kicked off my shoes, sat in my favorite chair, and just when I was feeling relaxed, loud music and pounding on my ceiling erupted from my apartment directly above mine. I tried to remain patient, but eventually it became obvious that I would have to walk up there and plead for some peace and quiet. You know me, I don't plead very well. So by the time I reached his apartment door where I could hear the music blaring, it was so loud that I am still surprised to this day that his stereo system was able to withstand the punishment. I could not only hear, but I could feel the distinct thumping that I had heard prior to arriving at the apartment. I enjoyed a good party as much as the next person, but this was the middle of the week, and it baffled me that no one else was standing there with me ready to confront the resident. I rang the doorbell. It was not answered because most likely it could not be heard inside. I started pounding on the door, and with each unanswered knock I became more frustrated. I then knocked with both hands, and finally this guy I had seen checking his mail once in a while opened the door. Before I could begin my tirade, he pulled me inside, and in the beginning forced me to dance with him to the Rolling Stones. I think the song was Brown Sugar. When the song was over, I thanked him for the dance, even though I wanted to beat his brains out. I asked if he could calm down because I really needed the rest. I bumped into him in the mailboxes a few days later, and he told me that he knew where I worked. It was a very popular bar. He said that he would often drop people off there, and he could see me inside through the window, and there was something indescribable about me that intrigued him. He often would sit there a few minutes and watch me serve the various customers. I asked him how could he sit in a car in Manhattan and watch me through a window when parking was one of the most sought-after things in Manhattan. I said, "You must be a cab driver," and he said no, he was a struggling writer. Driving a cab and knowing the tricks of the trade was a lot like being a great cocktail waitress. The hours were shitty and the customers could be infuriating, but if you had the right personality and attitude, there was good money to be made from it. When he asked me what my dreams were, I told him dreaming happens when you're sleeping. I simply want to be the best cocktail waitress alive, live a fun life, and leave the lofty and artistic ambitions for those who enjoy suffering. We intentionally, kept bumping into each other. Finally, he asked me out. We went out often and would talk about our former lives, our philosophy, our families, and eventually each other until we closed down whatever establishment we were in. After about 2 months, I thought I was falling in love with him, but I had such a cautious attitude toward love that it almost blew my chance at the most beautiful 3 years I had ever experienced. The realization of how special it was is because I was in love with him, and 2 months came and went, and he never attempted to kiss me. One night after going out, the usual ritual was he would say goodnight to me at my apartment door, and then continue upstairs to his apartment. But on one night in particular, we were standing at my apartment door, and he lingered, and I thought, this is it, he's going to kiss me. Instead, he wrapped his arms around me, and trying to describe it would be an injustice, other than to say it was the first time anyone had ever touched my soul. This caused a spiritual and psychological rapture that is impossible to describe. He said goodnight and ascended to his apartment. I was in my apartment maybe for 3 minutes before I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, reached his apartment, and knocked on the door. I found my soulmate, and I knew it. When he answered, I threw him on the floor, and we made love that was more spiritual than it was carnal. We were happily married for 3 years. I remember his eyes sparkled in the sun and shined in the dark, but they were always looking beyond the physical. We were indifferent to the world around us. Once you find your soulmate, there is a serene comfort in knowing that someone will always have your back. No matter what the circumstances, that through the laughter, fights, deaths, and extreme challenges, he will always be there, even beyond death. I received a phone call one day informing me that Charles had dropped dead unexpectedly from an undetected brain aneurysm. You can only imagine the grief I felt. You bet I considered killing myself and came close more than a few times. It shattered my concept of faith and hope, and for a very long time, I was nothing more than a programmed robot going through the motions. I was existing. I was not living. It was a long time coming, but I knew I had to make drastic changes, and 2 weeks later I was on a plane headed towards California. I will always remember that amazing feeling of two souls that were meant to be together in this world and beyond. You need to relax. You have loved and lost, and that happens to everyone. It will happen to you again, but it will only be tragic if it is your soulmate that you lose. There is a song lyric by one of those English duos, but I can't remember their name. The lyric is, "Remember, love is just a game, and it can always come again." Make it a game, and at the same time, search for your soulmate. If you find that person, any further lost loves will be worth the time and effort you spend on them. You never imagine that among all your family and friends, it is a person that you have known for a comparatively short time is the one that inspires and heals you in a single Saturday night conversation. I continue to make foolish mistakes and learn from them, but from that point on, I search for my soulmate and try to find what it would feel like, because I had learned from a cocktail waitress that it could be life-changing. Marlene and I stayed friends and hung out sporadically until the day she told me she was going back to New York. She said California was cool, but it was missing that vibe and energy that could only be found in New York. As she so eloquently articulated it, I miss the sounds, smells, and the human animals that roam the streets. I received a letter from her one day, and in it she said she had found someone, though not a soulmate. It was pretty close, and they had opened a bar together in New Jersey, and they were working hard at it, and that every once in a while, when she was closing up for the evening, she could feel a breeze or the lights would flicker, and in there somewhere she could hear Charles say, "Way to go, baby. From one soul to another, you are a survivor." I can't say I was truly happy, but for the first time in my life, I knew he was there and protecting me, and at least I found out what it meant to be content. About 10 years ago, my family and I went to New York because they had never been there before. As a young boy, it was an experience I was lucky to have had. I wanted to experience it again as an adult with the ones I love. However, if there's one place anyone should experience, regardless of age, it is New York. As I write this story's conclusion, I want to kick myself in the ass because I never even thought of trying to find Marlene and her bar.